Hello, and welcome back to the Live Label Free podcast and to part 3 of my series on autism and binge eating. In the previous episodes, we discussed the role of interoception in sensing hunger and fullness, the difference between extreme hunger and binge eating disorder, the connection between the nervous system and the sensory experience of food, and how eating can be a form of stimming and how food can be used to procrastinate and escape demands. As I promised in the last episode, today we're going to be digging a little well into the procrastination aspect, and we're specifically going to talk about how difficulty with transitions and the concept of autistic inertia can contribute to binge eating in neurodivergent people. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're listening on YouTube and leave a rate and review for the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Not only do positive ratings and reviews help other people to find the show, but it's also a completely free way to support me and the continuation of this podcast. I so appreciate your time and energy, my friend. And now, let's dive into part 3 of this neurodivergent binge eating series all about procrastination, transitions, and autistic inertia.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to the Live Label Free podcast, where we talk about autism, ADHD, eating disorders, existentialism, and everything in between. I'm your host, Livia Sarah. Now let's get into it. If you are autistic, or perhaps are listening to this because you want to better understand someone who's autistic, you probably know that autistic people have difficulty with transitions, especially when we are immersed in our special interest or are hyper-focused on something that we've made a commitment to follow through until the end. Transitioning into something else can feel like a monumental demand. This difficulty with transitions can lead to binging in 2 different ways. Reason number 1 has to do with what we talked about earlier, and that's how restriction can lead to compensation later, aka binging later in the day or after a prolonged restrictive eating disorder. When you're in hyper-focus mode and not wanting to transition out of what you're doing, whether this is as short as a few hours on a given day, or due to the fear of transitioning out of an eating disorder, you are procrastinating eating. This delay can cause you to become so hungry that your body will at one point compensate by making up for all the food it's missed. To understand this concept, imagine you swimming laps in a very large swimming pool. If you're enjoying yourself, just having some fun, just casually swimming, you're likely going to come up for air whenever you feel like you need air. Just like how in healthy circumstances, someone eats whenever they know they need to eat or feel like eating. But here's the kicker. Imagine you get so immersed in staying underwater that you forget to come up for air. You're swimming until you finally complete your lap, and only then do you realize, oh gosh, I really do need to put my head above the water. Well, I'm sure we can all guess what you'll do when you do finally come up. You'll gasp for air like your life depends on it, because your life does depend on it. Well, that's exactly what happens when you experience extreme hunger or binge eating after a period of not eating enough. Now, the second way difficulty with transitions can lead to binge eating is that the eating itself can be a transition tool, which can turn into autistic inertia. But first, you may be wondering, what the heck is autistic inertia? Well, from physics, we know that the inertia of an object is the tendency of the object to remain at rest or, if moving, to continue its motion. Similarly, autistic inertia refers to the difficulty many autistic individuals face when it comes to starting or stopping activities. This can manifest as hyper-focusing on our special interest and then procrastinating eating like we talked about earlier, but eating itself can also be like a flow state we enter. Once we're in motion with the food, it can be really difficult to stop eating. And as I'm actually saying this, I'm reminded of something one of my clients said a while ago, and that is, as soon as I think of a food, I have to eat it. During my own binges, I would often be eating something and eat it so fast because I was already planning the next 10 things I was going to eat. In a way, I do feel this is intertwined with autistic traits because, at least for me, I'm mentally always 10 steps ahead. I'm always planning out everything way in advance, and I do the same for food a lot of the time. However, when it comes to autism and binge eating, this can definitely be tough because all the foods our mind wants to eat often doesn't agree with our body's physical capacities. Autistic inertia, then, can almost be seen as the thing that allows us to transcend into a flow state that temporarily numbs us from these physical limits and in turn may cause you to only realize how full and how uncomfortable you are when you snap out of that temporary transcendence. When you take all of this and then add in the soothing and sensory components of food, the connection between autism and binging suddenly no longer seems so baffling, does it? But there is more. Yes, there are even more reasons why autistic people may binge eat, including black and white thinking, analysis paralysis as a result of not being able to choose what to eat, food needing to, quote-unquote, make sense, and hormonal reasons such as PMS and PMDD. If any of that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, like this episode if you're on YouTube, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and positive review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and stay tuned for the next episode in this series on autism and binge eating. Bye-bye for now.
Baby, just one foot in front of the other.